Welcome back to Guff Stuff Weekly Podcast. I'm your host this week, Javen.
And I'm Guff.
We're riding off the wave from last week. This will be part 2 of our Pathfinder dissection.
Yeehaw.
So let's jump right into it. Last week we talked about character creation and combat.
Yep.
This week I'd like to talk a little bit about our setting that we've been using.
Ooh, sounds good.
And
Guess I have some knowledge on that one.
Yeah. And maybe a little bit about the GM side of things. And yeah, we'll just kind of see where it takes us.
So the setting for reference is we're running the first adventure path that they made for Pathfinder 2e, which is called Agents of the Edgewatch. And for reference also, I would like to inform you that when we started this, I thought it was going to be a good introduction just because I like the whole city thing, and it kind of keeps everything from getting wild, and there's not a whole lot of freedoms to just run around and go do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to keep the group kind of linear, narrow-minded, let's focus on something. And I thought a city campaign would be good. Little did I know, though, until after I started reading into this, and we've already been playing a few sessions, that this whole Pathfinder adventure path was written before they actually released all the books.
Mm-hmm.
So the designer, actually, I caught an interview of him. He said that it was really hard, and so it feels a little unbalanced at times.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they didn't have any reference to work off of. They didn't have the core materials to work off of to have an idea how to gauge too many opponents, more magic, not enough magic, and blah, 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 blah. So we've had to go through some struggles, and it's been the grind fest again, because there's a lot of encounters sometimes. There's really not much reward for some of them, which, I mean, you're agents, you're cops. It shouldn't be much reward anyway. But you're also playing a fantasy role-playing game, so
there's got to be some give and
yeah. And so that's what we're working off of. And so, and the players have to be a good alignment. I mean, that's just kind of the thing. You have to know. You have to have a law enforcement alignment. That's just You just have to.
We have everybody from lawful neutral to chaotic good to neutral good, and I think we've had lawful good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's just what we're working off of. So anything we talk about is based off of Agents of the Edgewatch, which was released before, or not released, but written before you actually released the whole books.
Yeah.
I think we're doing okay.
Yeah, so that being
fun.
said, it's been, from a player standpoint, it's been really fun to have a structured campaign.
Right.
Where I don't have to worry about, like, oh, what am I going to do as a player, or what do I want as a player? I don't have to worry about going and
fulfilling some ancient backstory
exactly.
stuff. No. You're literally a cop and you just got to go do your job.
Yeah, our job is not to quote-unquote save the world. It's to keep the order in peace for right now.
Yeah, to keep the order of this precinct you guys are in charge of, to keep it good for the Radiant Festival, is what they say.
Which the Radiant Festival is this, like, 1,000
yeah, I think it's a 1,000-year celebration.
Yeah.
For some war over something or another. I don't remember all the details. There's a lot of lore in Pathfinder I don't know anything about yet. So
the cool thing about it, though, is as a player, you're given like cop training, city guard training, so you can always use non-lethal damage with any weapon.
Right.
Which is kind of encouraged a little bit. We've done that quite a bit to get our guys in prison.
Yep.
And we haven't really entered kill mode too much.
No, not unless it's just beasties. The random beastie that shows up, and
unless basically when we tell the alchemist it's go time, then he's all for a kill
so he
mode.
turns on the fire bombs and starts going.
Yep. But yeah, that's our setting. It's in the biggest city in the continent, Absalom. There's several modules that have been written for Absalom. I believe one of the starter sets.
Yep.
Like one of the free RPG Day ones is Big Trouble in Little Absalom.
Yep. Almost everything that was initially put out was basically tied to or comes from Absalom.
It's the equivalent of their Waterdeep.
Yeah.
For those of you that are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
I guess we didn't talk about this before, but the nice thing about Pathfinder is there's a lot of parallels to Dungeons and Dragons. So if you've played before, it will help you, but it might also hinder you at the same time.
Yes.
Pathfinder, I feel like as a first RPG, might not be the best choice.
Yeah, I would agree.
Unless if you guys are, mad scientists and scholars.
Yeah, you like to punish yourself, start with Pathfinder 2.
Yep. But otherwise, it's a very crunchy system, very robust. Lots of options that we talked about in the last episode.
Yep.
I guess I want to talk a little bit about game mastering.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting.
How do you feel about improvisation in this system? Like your ability to take things on the fly and alter them a little bit if you need to.
I think the more I get familiar with the system, and right now we're running a very linear style campaign, it makes it a little harder just to improv on the go. Mm-hmm. Because there's some rules they set into place that they don't want because it'll break the illusion of what's going on in the campaign. And I'll use an example of the last thing you guys did was the break-in of the bank.
Yeah.
The ship was supposed to fall over. You guys had an idea of what was going to happen. You weren't sure how it was going to happen. You knew that the ship had something to do with it. But in the module, it specifically states that things fall. There's a curtain from the sails kind of blocks what you can hypothesize all you want, but you're not supposed to know, quote unquote, what happened.
Yeah, that was a very
it's hard to
player versus character knowledge.
Yeah, it's hard to
part of the game.
It's hard to just improvise that kind. I think when we do the next campaign, I think improvisation will be a lot easier. I think it'll be needed because Pathfinder is not very forgiving. If you go up against a CR2 and you're a CR1, it's going to be a tough fight. You go up against CR3, you're just dead.
Yep. Yeah, we experienced that in the one shots.
I mean,
I feel like the module itself. This is kind of a review / rules discussion a little bit. Yeah. But this part 2 is also somewhat of a review of the Edgewatch campaign.
Yeah, that and just the basics that we know of so far in our use of the system.
There's definitely been some memorable moments.
Oh, yeah.
There's been some twisted things for sure.
There's some dark stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely not it's a PG-13 to maybe rated R.
Yeah, there's definitely some rated R stuff. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. When you read through the first book, as a DM, it'll tell you, hey, talk this over with your players, make sure some of this stuff's okay. It's really important that you do because some of it, if you have younger players, it's not appropriate. Thankfully, our youngest player is 18, so no big deal.
Yeah. I feel like there's been memorable NPCs.
Yeah.
Sergeant Olo is one that comes to mind. The sleepy dwarf who's our sergeant.
Yeah. I like him. You haven't dealt with the other ones too much. L.A.G.S, he's the captain, but
he's just grouchy.
You don't really have to deal with him too much yet. I'm sure more of it's coming, but you deal with Sergeant Olo every day.
Yeah. And I feel like the NPCs have given you as GM a lot of fun things to play. Like you haven't had to play the same generic NPC.
No, they're all different.
Each one definitely feels like its own person.
Actually makes me try to work at just having a different tone even when I'm talking to you guys. I don't normally do that as a DM. You can just tell the players, okay, this is a vendor and here's what you're talking about. But these characters they need to be this way because everything you guys go through now has an effect later. So Sergeant Olo's sleepiness and his kind of inability to focus may very well have something to do with the storyline in the future. And if I screw it up now, it won't be so fun in the future. You'd be like, well, where did this come from? Well, he's been sleepy. And if L.A.G.S is this crab ass that thinks you guys are a bunch of imbeciles, and I don't treat you like that as the captain, then later when he starts being nice to you, it's not going to mean anything.
Right.
So I'm not saying there isn't other systems. I've played plenty of other systems that NPCs should have been more, but it doesn't seem like they pushed it really hard on you. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but that's just how it just seems like everything you do now has an effect later. and it makes a difference in what goes on.
And that's good writing.
It's very good writing.
At its core.
Yeah, I love the writing. It kind of reminds me of Dragon Heist a little.
That was a
very well written book.
Shout out to Chris Perkins.
Yeah, that was a very good. And my players loved it, and they just that was one of the best campaigns they've been through.
Yeah,
they're like, man, Dragon Heist was awesome, and so far, Agents Edgewatch, they loved this too. But we're all still learning the system essentially, so it's been a little different.
There's been growing pains.
Oh yeah, definitely growing pains. Yeah.
And the module feels pretty cutthroat. As far as how difficult it is.
It is very, very brutal.
I guess the next thing to talk about would be the bestiary.
Yeah.
I've encountered monsters already in the 4 levels that we played that I had never seen before, and I'm a veteran of D&D for about 10 years.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy. Because every time you turn the page, there's a whole new creep that you just never could. I don't know where these people come up with some of this stuff, man. Yeah. I love it. I really do.
A lot of originality in the bestiary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose that's why there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
And the game's been out, 2 years now?
Yep.
There's already 3. And obviously they're going to have more. And every new Pathfinder, every new adventure path comes out, they have new beasts. And so, they could probably print 4 and 5 if they wanted to by just taking the monsters out of there.
It definitely it reminds me a lot of Second Ed for how many different monsters there are.
Yeah.
The second edition Dungeons and Dragons, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah, for Second Ed, yep.
But there was so many bestiaries for second edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And it was one of the coolest parts about it. And the second edition of Pathfinder feels a lot like that, where it's just so many things to fight.
And each one all different, unique. A little different. Yeah. It's even we're fighting 2 different street gangs. So far, you've been against 2 of them.
Yeah.
And you definitely know they were 2 different because of the way they were fighting.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of breaks your head a little bit. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it a lot. It's a challenge, though. And that comes down to the bogging down feature, though. Is because we're learning stuff all the time. It almost feels like it's a little bit of a bog, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But, if you want to get a little role-playing in, it's kind of tough when you're spending 2 hours learning a monster fight.
I definitely, looking back, I wouldn't recommend Agents of the Edgewatch for a first time.
No, I wouldn't either. I would probably find something different.
Yeah.
I would probably go with their 3rd or 4th one. There's one that, something about 1,000 feet below or 1,000 deaths in Absalom or something. That one seemed like it probably is the more made for more beginner
friendly, yeah. But we're tabletop RPG veterans.
Yeah, so there's very few of us that have not been playing for many years.
So we decided to take a bite out of the biggest apple.
Yeah, I'd even say that even our newest players, I'd say probably the champion, he's been playing for 4 or 5 years already.
Yep.
And then even the 18-year-old's been playing since she was 7. I know that because she's my daughter. So
yeah,
she's been playing for a long time. And so it's so we felt comfortable doing it. I still think maybe going backwards, I would probably choose a different one. Just maybe make it a little easier on myself.
Yeah,
it's okay. We're learning.
I guess the last thing to talk about now is the community of Pathfinder.
Yep.
Which due to recent events that we don't need to get into, that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, you can watch plenty of YouTube videos.
Yeah, there's plenty of YouTube videos about the OGL and what Dungeons & Dragons has done.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be a mass migration of players to Pathfinder 2 edition, 2nd edition, or other role-playing games.
Yeah, I think just from watching the people I watch on YouTube, which I watch plenty, there was a few that basically were just Pathfinder 2 guys. But there's a lot of D&D guys I watch that are only doing Pathfinder 2, doing Dungeon Crawl Classics, doing some of the older school, just not even old school, but indie stuff that's not indie pretty much anymore because it's been thrown in the mainstream.
Yep.
So, yeah, everybody's kind of switching over, and I think, at least as far as YouTube and influencers go, I think most of them are pushing Pathfinder, whether it's edition 1 or 2. That seems to be the biggest one they're pushing.
Yep.
But they're definitely pushing a lot of other stuff. which is kind of cool.
Yeah, so I hopefully we'll see a renaissance in tabletop gaming again.
Yes.
We've already had this massive influx of people who wanted to start playing tabletop RPGs. Right. It's not something that just the nerds do anymore.
No. Something celebrities are doing, and they're doing their 3-hour one-shots on TV, and they're doing it. You got Vin Diesel, you got, any number with Joe Manganiello. He's got all kinds of famous people that play in his campaign. He's like 10 people in his campaign, and they're all people high
profile, yeah.
You throw a name out there, and everybody's like, "Oh, I've seen him in that movie," or "I know he's this comedian," or "I know he's a skateboarder," or whatever. It's quite. Just to kind of go off this a little bit, I think that this thing that happened, and I'm talking a little bit about the whole Wizards of the Coast thing. I don't want Wizards of the Coast to fail. Never have. I really don't want them to fail. I want them to keep pushing new product out and make it the best game ever, right? Yep. But on the other hand, them doing what happened, even if it was by accident or whatever they want to call it, was probably the best thing, like you said, that happened to gaming. It's going to add so many more new games. We've already played 5 or 6 new games, mostly because of you. In this store, this little tiny community we're playing because of what's happening. We've played Cyberpunk. We've played
Dungeon Crawl Classic. Stars Without Number. Blades in the Dark.
Yep. What was the other one Fluffy played? But we had Warhammer 40K.
Warhammer 40K, yep.
There's a few others. It's just... And so, that alone, which is adding all these new players to all these new systems, and I know we're talking about Pathfinder, that kind of leads back to Pathfinder.
It's a community thing.
Yeah, it leads back to the Pathfinder system. Pathfinder is just kind of taking the... Piazzo is taking the place of what Wizards of the Coast was doing. And they're doing it in huge, because, Kobold Press is pushing out books for all these different systems now, and they're coming up with their own system. Mm-hmm. And it's like, holy smokes, people. This is getting to be out of control, and it's great.
It is great. Just take what we've talked about in these 2 parts. Right. If you're thinking about Pathfinder, my general overall consensus is a thumbs up. If you put me on a scale of 1 to 10, I give it probably an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. I might go a little less just because I've been playing D&D since I was 10, which was a long time, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I love Pathfinder, though. I think for me as a DM, it's been... I probably enjoyed doing this more than I have most D&D.
Well, it's fresh. Is a nice thing. There's a lot of new
mechanics I can play with. And new challenges for my players. And not everybody knows everything about this system right now.
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things about it, is that if you're looking for something fresh for your crew... And it's fairly cheap to get into. You don't need to buy 3 different books.
No.
You can buy...
Oh, you can buy all the books.
All the books if you want.
Yeah.
But realistically, all you need is a core book and a bestiary.
Yeah.
And
if you were being really cheap, you could just Google
you could just core book it, yep.
Just buy a core book. You do need the core book. You don't want to try and play without the core book.
No.
At least one of you needs to have one. You could probably Google the monsters and stuff on it. I still buy the books just because it helps the company, and it's nice for me to have a hardcover to look at.
Yeah. Other than that, I think we've covered most of what we want to talk about for Pathfinder 2e and what we've been doing with it.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
What do we talk about next?
I think we'll talk about an indie game, probably.
Probably Stars Without Numbers.
Stars Without Numbers would be a good one to talk about.
I think we'll push that one a little bit.
So let's keep your ears and eyes peeled for that one. And we'll catch you next time. This has been Guff Stuff Weekly Podcast.
Alrighty. Later.